Giles County to be specific, behind our house was some woods. We decided to go camping. We were up there. It was nighttime. I'd gone back to get some firewood, and I had something thrown by my head into the fire. And I paused a minute, and I had something else fly by my head, and we realized it wasn't like an acorn or anything. It looked like a rock. And a couple seconds later, we had an 8 to 10 second scream that scared the living daylights out of all three of us. And I basically grabbed my little brother and went straight down the mountain, went through a fence, basically tore his leg up, got down to the house, met John down there, which he took an alternate route, banged on the door, got inside. After a little bit, my dad said, "Hey, let's go back up there and put the fire back out." I didn't want to go, but reluctantly, I went ahead and got in the truck. There was an access road that kind of paralleled my way down. So we went up that access road, and while he got out of the truck and he put out the fire, I basically sat in the truck and bit my fingernails and shivered, hoping that he wasn't going to get attacked, which he didn't. And he got back in the truck. We went back down, and I basically, from then on out, I had some trouble with some PTSD for quite a while after that. And that's the first encounter. The second encounter was out in Moneta, Virginia, a place called Snug Harbor. I went out to pick my brother up from a friend's house later one evening. I'm thinking it was around 10 or 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock. Went out, heard something on my way out, really didn't think anything of it. Picked him up, turned around, came back, and while I was reaching down to grab a CD or a pack of cigarettes, I can't remember what it was I was reaching down for, but my brother started saying, "Look, look, look, look." And I looked up and I seen the back half of this creature passing in front of us. And we waited until it basically got about 4 or 5 steps into the woods there, and then I gunned it back to the house. Went in. My dad wasn't awake this time, so we basically stayed up all night talking about it. And that's pretty much both of the encounters.
Did you see the thumbnail that I created for last week's episode by chance?
I think I did, yes.
Good, I was hoping you had. How does the subject in that thumbnail compare to the one that you and Rob saw?
It looks very, very similar. The top half of the torso was hunched over a whole lot more. It wasn't the thumbnail that I'm looking at that you created. The subject is standing up more of it has a better posture. This thing had terrible posture. Like it looked like its back had been almost broken. Like it was just like from the, I would say from the shoulder blades to the head, like it was almost completely horizontal.
Wow, I can understand why that did freak you out then. Yeah, that's pretty creepy. On last week's show, you said something I didn't understand, and I want to ask you about this before we actually dive into all these questions. You said that you live in the woods, but that you don't go into the woods now. Please clear that up for us.
Okay, so what I meant was I don't live in the woods anymore. I live in town. I must have misspoke on that one. But no, I live in a little small town called Dublin. I used to live in the woods. I think that's probably what I was trying to say, that I used to live in the woods. I mean, we basically lived in the woods for my whole teenage life. But after that stuff happened with that, I mean, I haven't lived anywhere near the woods since then. The closest that I'd been is at my mom's house for a couple months, and that's not really in the woods at all. I mean, there's a few trees there and everything, but there's no real woods around. And the current place that I live in Dublin, it's a little bustling town. It's nowhere near the woods or anything. But yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, I feared you'd just misspoken, so just wanted to ask for clarity on that.
Good thing.
Considering how John hadn't spent much time in the woods at all before you had that first encounter, did that experience hit him especially hard?
Well, I only saw him a few more times. Now we saw each other in school and we passed each other in school, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversation going on. And when we started back that September, and I don't know if this is related or not, but he missed the first 2 weeks of school. And I mean, back then we didn't have cell phones, so we didn't have the internet. Well, maybe we had the internet, but it was very, very young and in its infancy. And our communication was, pick up a phone and remember someone's number and, speak to them on the phone. And I wasn't much of a phone guy. And plus, I don't know, it affected me so much. I didn't want to drum up the conversation with him, to be honest with you. I mean, it was quite an experience for me, but I just don't know. We lost touch. I haven't spoken to him in years and years, so I really don't know how that affected him.
Hopefully not too bad. It sounds like it was almost kind of awkward whenever you did see him after that encounter.
It was very awkward. He almost seemed to avoid me after that.
Yeah, that's a pretty common thing when more than one person has an encounter, so it's not just you. If you've had a dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest on one of my 2 Bigfoot shows, please go to mybigfootsighting.com.
You hear the word, buddy?
Advanced Auto Parts.
Need that die-hard power.
Well, Advanced Auto Parts is your die hard. True die hard.
You can install yours for free.
Oh, how cool is that? Oh, need a hand or?
This is how we advance.
When those 2 rocks were thrown between you and your tent, do you think they'd actually been thrown at you or just past you?
I thought about that for a long time, and the only answer that I could come up with that makes sense to me is I think that they were just trying to maybe get my attention or say, hey, this is our spot. You guys need to leave. I felt like with the after effects of like what happened, it wasn't a curiosity thing. And I think if one of those things wanted to hit you with a rock, I think they would. As much as I know about them now, I think if they're going to throw something at you, you're going to get hit with it.
Yeah, that makes 2 of us. I'm pretty sure they would hit you if they wanted to. You told us about the vocalization the 3 of you heard. Did you feel any nausea afterwards?
I felt it all the way down the mountain. Yes, I did. It was, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. That's something I didn't really remember until you just said that. That's really weird. But yeah, it wasn't so much during the scream. It was more when I was going down the mountain with Rob. Like, I mean, I could definitely tell when, like, we hit the dirt several times. And when I was getting back up, I noticed it. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually kind of weird, man. I don't know why I didn't mention that. I guess I just didn't remember. It's a good thing with these encounters like this, you know, when you retell them, all these new details that you couldn't remember before comes up, you know.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, don't feel bad about not recalling that because, I mean, you're doing good to know your own name, so no one could fault you for that. Were you holding it together pretty well until you looked over and saw the look on Rob and John's faces?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of time in between the scream and the look on his face, but I think it was just I was more in a fight or flight kind of mode at that point, and all I was thinking about was flight. Holding it together, I don't know what anybody else would do. Well, probably anybody in my position would probably just freeze themselves, but that's pretty much all that I felt was fight or flight. As far as holding it together or not, I think it all collapsed when I came through the door. That's when I wasn't holding it together anymore. I was pretty cool and collected when it came to grabbing him and running down the mountain there. But as soon as I knew I was safe, like I was crying. I mean, I was hysterical. I mean, my dad had to calm us down we were all three hysterical. But I know it was a good 10 or 15 minutes that he, you know, was trying to calm us down. And finally he was just like, okay, you guys, when you're done, let me know and we'll talk about this thing, you know. And that's pretty much how that happened.
You deserve a lot of credit. I mean, when it goes sideways the way it did that night, you held it together and got business taken care of. You grabbed Rob and hauled him down that mountain and got him to safety as well as yourself. And then after you were in relative safety, once you were in the house, then you broke down. So you did what you needed to do. And like I said, you deserve a lot of credit for that. You said you drug Rob down the mountain that night as you're trying to get away from the creature. Why did you have to do that? Wasn't he trying to get away?
Well, he was, but there was a significant difference between his body size and mine at that point. I'd already hit a growth spurt. You know, I was 16 years old. I was a running back on the football team. Rob was a little, I'll describe Rob back then. When he was 13, he was probably 5 foot tall and probably weighed 150 pounds, which puts him at a pretty hefty weight for his age. And, you know, I was lean and skinny, and I'd played football for going on about 8 years then, and that was my natural thing was running. And I knew the instant that I had to grab him that he wasn't gonna be able to get down on his own. Like it just wasn't gonna happen. Like that thing would have had it. And with me helping him and everything, I think it turned out, you know, the right way. And poor guy was just, you know, he was just unfortunate. Now later on in his life, he leaned out, you know, and he looked a lot like I did. But those younger years for Rob, up until he was about 17, I'd say, maybe 16, he was short and pudgy, you know, and I was just worried about him, you know. I just didn't see him getting down there on his own.
Well, like I said, you're a good man. Most people, they would have packed up and just taken off and the heck with anyone else with them. But no, you stayed and did the best you could to get your little brother down that mountain into safety. So, yeah, you deserve a lot of credit for that.
I saw an episode of Terror in the Woods. There was a bunch of kids that were running away from this Bigfoot, and there was an ice chest out front. like a freezer or whatever, and like this kid, his brothers locked him out of the mobile home, and he had to jump in that ice freezer. Like I would have never done that to my brother.
I saw that. Yeah, when I watched
Yeah.
that, I just couldn't believe that. Well, I could, but yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah, and they kept him in that thing for a while too.
They did. Yeah, that's what he said. He said they did. Yeah, that was pretty bad, but when it goes sideways, you never know how you're going to respond. So, and
Yeah,
that
I agree
reminds me
with
of
that.
another eyewitness who I spoke with about his dog man encounter. He was out with his buddy one day, I forgot where, but this dog man jumps out and he took off running and left his buddy who was overweight behind and said, "Sorry, so-and-so," I forgot his name, but he just took off running. And next thing he knew, his buddy was blowing right by him. And left him there. He was running still, but his buddy blew right past him.
Oh,
And
that's great.
yeah, he made it back to the house before he did. Well before he did. I thought that was hilarious when I heard about
Oh
that.
man, that is great. That serves him right.
Yeah, it does. But then again, I mean, you can't be too hard on people. You never know, like I said, how you're going to respond when things get sideways.
Yeah, I totally get that. No, but it's definitely a funny situation there. I don't know if Rob would have done that, but you know, there was one situation. I was riding a motorcycle up on the dirt road, and there was down in the valley was like a cornfield, and we were almost racing. And it was about that time. It was before that happened, before the encounter happened. But we were going from my grandmother's house, which was actually like about a half mile away from our double wide, and I was on the motorcycle just kind of putting on the road, and I looked down, and I've never seen my brother run that fast in my life, and I don't know why that just jogged that memory, but that's kind of cool.
And you've got the proper motivation, you can really pick them up and put them down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. How far was your camp from the house?
Now I've got my encounter on my own channel, and if you go to that and you click on that video, it says my own encounter. It shows the Google Earth. I kind of did like a little. It's like a measurement from the house to the top of the hill. I think it was like a half mile, quarter mile, something like that.
That felt like 5.
Yeah, it did. It did, especially going through those trees and anticipating that that fence coming up. I wasn't exactly going 100% speed. You know, there was times where I did hit 100%, and you know, but a lot of it was I was going slow for Rob and going slow because I didn't want to hit that fence.
Oh, sure, yeah. Between trying to drag him down the mountain and being worried about that barbed wire fence down at the bottom of it, then yeah, I'm sure you weren't going all that fast.
Yeah, if it was just me, I would have beaten John down there by at least 30 seconds or so. I mean, that's my guess. John was a pretty fast guy.
Oh, I'm sure he was, but if you're a running back, you must have had some pretty good speed yourself.
Yeah, I was okay back then. I wasn't bad.
I believe it. If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Was it almost worse running away from the relative safety of the fire that night to get home, or were you glad to be doing that?
Well, I'll tell you this. When we entered the woods and it started getting dark, like from the fire, you know, being behind us or whatever, I thought I'd made a mistake because it was pretty dark that night. I can't remember about the moon phase that night or anything like that, but I do remember that it was really dark. And I'll tell you what, I almost thought that I made a bad mistake. Well, I mean, you know, to this day I kind of flip-flop. I almost kind of wish that I would have taken the road with John, because obviously, you know, it didn't get John, and that would have alleviated, you know, all of that, oh crap, it's pitch black, you know, where do I go, you know, kind of feeling, and I wouldn't have hurt my brother, you know, scraping his knee up, and I mean, he had scratches everywhere, man, like it's a wonder I didn't put his eye out from a branch or something.
Please don't be too hard on yourself. You're put in a very difficult situation, and you just handled it the best way you knew how. And I think you deserve a lot of credit for how you handled it, so don't be too hard on yourself. How long did you stay in that home after having that first experience?
Well, let me think about that. We moved over there about the time I was 14 or 15. We were there about a year or so when the encounter happened, and we didn't stay there much longer. We stayed there another year, and my grandmother passed away, so we moved up into her house, and we rented out the double wide. So that, I mean, we were still in the same overall location, but not in the exact location. I mean, like I said, it was probably like, I don't know, a quarter to a half a mile up the road. And then we stayed there probably, I don't know, another 6 months or so.
I'm sure you couldn't wait to get out of it, though.
Yeah, it wasn't a great place at nighttime. During the day, I still didn't venture but maybe a couple steps into the woods here and there, but I never went into the woods after that. Like, I was done at that point. But up at Grandma's house, the neighbors were a little bit closer, and that kind of gave me a little bit of a feeling of safety. I'm really not sure why, but I guess with the more the people, you know, I guess my mindset was the more people, the least that those things want to come around.
Being a kid, living right there in the woods, it really is a shame that you couldn't go out and just explore whenever you wanted to.
Yeah, we did it a lot beforehand, and even before that, we lived close to the woods before we even moved into the double wide. So, like, from a very young age, you know, that's what we did. That was our thing, you know, and it was about the time, well, I'd started playing guitar around 13. So after that encounter happened, I pretty much stayed in the house from then on out. And so did Rob, by the way. And that's when my interest in playing guitar really ramped up. So that really served as a really good coping mechanism for me. That and art. I've been doing both of those since I can remember. I've got about 30 years of musicianship under my belt now, so, and well, about 30 years of art under my belt too. So I just wish I could have made some money with them.
No, I understand. Your second encounter happened about 4 years after the first one. Had you come to terms yet with that first experience before that second encounter happened?
Oh God, no. I'll tell you what happened. I pushed it back in the back of my mind, and that's where that encounter lived. You know, I didn't bring it up. I didn't talk to Rob. I didn't talk to anybody about it after that. You know, we had a few conversations the first couple of weeks after, you know, it happened, but it kind of tapered off, and we just kind of knew, like, just don't bring it up. And that kind of served as a good thing for me. I had some other things going on in my life anyway. I was in my younger 20s. I was 20. I had just met my now ex-wife, future mother of my kids. So I had a lot of things going on in my life at that point to kind of distract me from that. And then when we saw that thing through the windshield, man. Things changed again. And here I go again, back into isolation. Heck, I didn't hardly even come out of my room for a long time. Then I got married and we moved to the city, and that was that for the woods. And even though that I lived in the woods, I'll go ahead and clarify this real quick. Even though that I lived in the woods, still in Snow Harbor, I did not go into the woods. My path was door, car, car, door. That's from the front door to the car. And I didn't venture out. I didn't want to venture out. I didn't want to see what was out there. And normally I would go pretty quickly. Even at night, like when Dad asked me to go pick him up that night, I remember, like, I did not want to go. It was just it became a routine for me, like, to just stay away from the woods,
I'll bet you did stay away from the woods. And that right there, that's what I thought you were talking about when you said that you lived in the woods, but you didn't go into the woods. I thought, okay, here's a guy who actually has a home in the woods, but he goes, like you said, from door to car, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there were some other times where we were out in the front yard, which the front yard in Snug Harbor, it faced the road. Like, okay, if you're looking from the front door, the driveway goes straight out from where you're standing, about, I don't know, 80 feet maybe, and then there's like I want to say a cul-de-sac, but it really wasn't a cul-de-sac. It was just a dead end. But people did turn around there a lot. But once you go that 80 feet out the driveway, you just turn right, and it just went to the right at that point. But like, the yard was pretty big, and every now and then, me and my brother, during the daytime, or me and my brother and my dad would go out and pass the football, or if we had to work on the car, but that's not in the woods. That was in our yard,
There's definitely a difference. How far were you from your new home when you and Rob had that second encounter?
Well, when I went to go get him, it wasn't but maybe 300 or 400 yards out the road from the house that I heard that cracking and stuff. But like when I went to get him and then come back, it was there was a mile or two in between the house. Like, whatever that was, I don't know what that noise was when I first went out. It could have been it, or it could have been a deer. I really don't know, but my mind wants to connect the two incidents for some reason. And if it was the same creature, we're looking at, like, it traveled a little ways there out towards the middle of the more forested area. So when I was coming back, it was probably a mile or two from the house.
That's close. I'm sure that didn't help to calm your nerves after having that experience.
It sure didn't, man.
Hey, Georgia. Looking for quality, affordable health insurance? At GeorgiaAccess.gov, there are many great ways to find a plan that meets your needs and budget. Open enrollment begins November 1st. Georgia Access. Your health, your way.
Me and my brother lived on the upstairs part of this house, and we had a circular window. I don't know if you ever saw those, like up in the attic, kind of. We had like a loft kind of that we stayed up in. It was, you could see the A-frame in our room. It was more of a loft room, and we had two circular windows, one near the stairs that you used to come up, that was on one end, the back end of the house, and then on the front end of the house it had another circular window, and that was where my bed was. It was right next to that window, and I'm telling you what, man, I had to get a sheet and put over that thing after that happened. I just did not want to look outside.
I can understand why. Yeah, that's one thing when you have an encounter with a dog man miles and miles away from home, but if you're only 1-2 miles away, especially after having that first encounter that you and Rob had, yeah, that's totally understandable. And speaking of that, did seeing that dog man that night, when you two had that second encounter, almost push you or Rob over the edge?
I don't know what I would define as the edge on that, because it felt like I was already over it. When I started hearing those sounds, when I first went out to go get Rob, like, I started thinking, you know, it was in the back of my mind, like, oh no, you know, because anytime I was anywhere near the woods and I heard any kind of popping and cracking, like that feeling started coming over me again, you know. It was every single time, you know, and most of the time I wouldn't look. But the times that I did, you know, I would find that there was a squirrel or a deer or, you know, somebody's cat or something trampling around in the leaves. But over the edge was probably, yeah, I went, yeah, it was definitely over the edge. I mean, I was basically hyperventilating, you know, the whole time home. My brother had to really, really calm me down, like, when we got home. He was a lot more mature 4 years later, and he really had to calm me down up there. And I just kept telling him, I don't want it to come in the house, you know. I don't want it to follow us, you know, back. And I didn't know what to do about that.
Yeah, that's not a very good thought. It's not a thought that's making me warm and fuzzy, the idea of a dog coming into the house.
No, definitely not.
Not at all. How long did you say the claws were on the tips of its toes?
Well, okay. The way that it looked to me was, okay, just imagine a normal toe, say a human's toe, okay, not a canine toe. Because this thing had weirdly, I don't know, his feet, the feet on it was weird looking, man. I can't really say whether if it was canine or human. It looked to be like a hybrid of, like, maybe both. But the toe, if you imagine a toe and you look at it side profile, so you see the floor, okay, and then the pad of your toes touching the floor, and then several inches up, you know, you get the top of your toe. Normally, like on a human's toenail, like if it was to grow out, it grows out pretty straight, and then it starts curling over. And that's what it looked like. It looked like it had, like, kind of went out straight and then curled over at the edge. And then on the bottom of it, it was very flat. Like, I don't know why that detail sticks out to me, but, like, I can see that toenail, like, as I'm speaking about it. But I would say it was probably 2 inches long from the nail bed. Well, maybe 2.5. I'm looking at my finger here, and it was probably as long as my forefinger. If I curl it at the end, that's what that nail looked like. A couple inches.
Sounds like they're pretty gnarly looking.
They were.
Yeah, they must have been. Could you see, when you're looking at its feet, if its claws were actually touching the ground?
Well, kind of. I guess, yeah. When it raised its foot up is when I saw the claw. Like, that's when I noticed it, because, like, when the foot came up or whatever, it kind of came up like, you know, like if you imagine someone stepping and then bringing their foot up. Like, I saw the edge of it, but like it almost gleamed in the light. Yeah, that's about all I can say on that.
Well, like I said earlier, you have so much going through your mind. No one can fault you for not knowing all these small details.
Yeah, it was kind of a split second, but, like, I guess, like, where my eyes went from my brother's face horizontally from right to left, it kind of landed near his feet, where his feet was. You know, that's the first thing I saw was the feet.
How tall would you say it was?
Oh man, this thing was tall, dude. Like if he would have straightened out, the way the creature looked was it. Okay, if you imagine like at the shoulder blades, if you would just like, if you saw the thumbnail, we'll go back to that again. If you looked at the thumbnail on your on the video of the last encounter there, the dog man in your picture is more standing up with a better posture than I would say that the one that I had encountered. It almost looked like from the shoulder blades, or maybe a little bit below the shoulder blades, like it was hunched over, like it had this like hunchback kind of look to it. But if it was, I mean, that position that he was in there, I would say he was at least 6 to 6.5 feet tall. But if it would have raised up like and did like a correct posture, that thing would have been at least 7.5 feet tall.
How wide would you say its head was?
Well, the angle that I was at, I couldn't quite tell you how wide it was. Now, I'll do a little bit of speculating here. I would say it was at least twice as wide as a human's head. Maybe a little smaller.
If that's the case, did its head look to be in proportion to the size of its body?
It did. As far as, well, let me actually rephrase that. It actually looked a little small because the torso of this thing was absolutely humongous. Like it's hard to describe really, but it almost had like a V-shaped torso. But once you get up to the shoulders, you could tell this thing had a lot of girth to it. But yeah, it's I just don't know. I don't know how to describe that.
Oh, that's all right. If you're trying to describe a bear or a dog or something like that you see all the time, that's one thing. But trying to describe something like this, especially when you're compromised the way you were, totally understandable that you'd have a hard time.
Yeah, it was really just a shock. I mean, though, I think the whole encounter may have lasted 5 to 6 seconds, which it felt like an eternity. But any time I go back and relive it, you know, it seems like it was a longer and longer occurrence. But I try to keep a more logical mind about it and take into account everything else that was going on. And you know, it was probably 5 to 8 seconds long. And now, as far as like me seeing it, I only saw it for like maybe a second and a half, and then I saw a silhouette. I would say compared to a bear, I've seen several bears. A full-grown black bear is what I'm used to seeing in this part of the country. I would say that this thing was much wider than a bear.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I'd feel safe to say 2 bears wide, but maybe 1.5 bears wide. I mean, this thing was huge. Its torso was huge. The arms were really lanky. The waist was thin. The top of the legs where the thighs would be, those things were ginormous.
Well, I'm sure they were.
On December 1st, legendary director John Woo returns with a new Christmas classic, Silent Night, rated R, December 1st.
Very good, bro.
Were its ears on the sides of its head or more on top?
Kind of in between. If you were comparing it to a humanoid head, the ears were they were farther up on the head a little bit. Not much, but enough to where you could, you know, definitely tell It was more in between. I wouldn't say on top of the head, but the ears seemed like they were super long, and it may have just been the hair that was kind of sprouting out from its ears that made it look long, but they were very pointy. I definitely remember that from the left ear. I got a really good shot of that from the ear back to the back of its head. But it was probably, I would say 6 to 8 inches long, maybe the ear, maybe a little shorter.
That's pretty long. Did it have them pinned, or were they pointing straight up?
They were in a pin position. They were almost horizontal with the top of its head, like it was. They were definitely laid back.
Wasn't happy then.
No, it probably wasn't. We probably surprised it, and that's
Take it easy.
what my brother told me when we got back.